Another woke TikToker made a hate video about me. New York's governor tries so hard to be woke that she's accidentally racist, disturbing new student loan data, and another TikToker insists that you must find fat people attractive. All that and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my new daily series where I take on the craziest ideas from the internet and our politics from a center-right independent perspective. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and sticking around, and if you're returning, don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your thoughts as we go along. I do read the comments, and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Now guys, welcome back to the show. I know you missed me so much on Monday and Tuesday. Like I told you, I was out of town. I went to go see my sister graduate college from the University of Connecticut. Congrats. We didn't know this day would come. We weren't sure, but you made it. Anyway, I want to talk to you guys about that experience for a second because honestly, the absolute state of woke colleges is just beyond parody at this point. They started the commencement ceremony with a land acknowledgement to the Native Americans that once owned the land that UConn is on. Take a listen to this.
We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Scotaycoke, Golden Hill Pawcusset, and Nipmuc peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. We thank them for their strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspire to uphold our responsibilities according to their example.
I've heard about these land acknowledgements before, but this was the first time I've encountered one in person. And I've got to say, it's some of the most insufferable, cringe virtue signaling I've seen in some time. My philosophy on these land acknowledgements is incredibly simple. Give it back or shut the up. Seriously, what good, what meaningful change, what impact does this have beyond signaling your virtue? It's also ironically colonialist in a way, in that the actual land in question wasn't always owned by one tribe of Native Americans in most cases. In fact, those tribes often warred and sometimes drove each other out of lands and claimed them. However, these land acknowledgements freeze into time, the moment that white settlers discovered the land and whoever occupied it at that moment as the rightful owners, who for all time must be acknowledged. What about the people who owned it before them? They don't matter, of course, because the entire perspective is dictated from the white settler perspective, which is just hilarious to me because that's what they're supposed to be fighting or whatever. It's all dumb. It does absolutely nothing to help Native Americans. In fact, many Native leaders think it's a stupid, cringe virtue signaling that harms more than it helps. And I find it absolutely eye-roll inducing. But what do you think? Have you encountered these land acknowledgements in the wild? And what do you make of them? Let me know in the comments. Now, let's get into our main topic for today's episode because yet another woke left-wing YouTuber has made a hate video about me. This time, it's Emma Thorne, a British YouTuber who apparently covers LGBT issues from a left-wing perspective. She made a long video reacting to me in pretty bad faith with extremely short snippets where she often omitted the actual part where I made my argument. And she had some interesting things to say that I want to react to. First up, Dear Emma here apparently doesn't like my name.
I'm not going to be able to carry on without saying it. You can absolutely rip into me for being mean. Brad, if you're watching this, you get one free mean thing at me. Here is the permit crab. You may do one bad thing today. Because I have to say this, Brad Polumbo sounds like a fake name. Brad Polumbo sounds like what you make up when you've just gone on the run and you're in a pinch. I'm Sally Gumbus. I'm Sally Gumbus. Brad Polumbo. I'm sorry. It's a real name. It's his name. This mean of me to say.
I don't have a whole lot to say about this because my name is what it is. I kind of like it, but it's not something I choose or have control over, and I don't really feel bad about it, but I'm not going to stoop to her level and kind of put any of these petty jabs back. I'm just going to shrug and let you guys decide, okay? Now, one thing Emma took strong objection to was the videos that I take where it's clips where I'm reacting to woke LGBT TikToks, and I put the title as Normal Gay Reacts to Insane LGBT TikToks or whatever. She really didn't like that framing of normal gay, and I will get into it, but here's what she had to say.
Normal gay is the funniest self-descriptor ever. I think that's hilarious. Alphabet community is very like the sort of thing that transphobes would usually say. Normal gay, also I was like, what could that mean other than being transphobic? There's like hints there of this like conservative, American conservative right-wing sort of thinking, calling things that he doesn't like, calling extreme things woke, as if woke isn't, you know, intended as woke essentially now means like extreme leftism. The meaning has changed because of how it's been sort of used and abused to mean things are bad, but woke is literally being awake to social issues, particularly racism. I've explained that and described that before. I think it's funny that people are happy to throw that around as like a bad thing, as if like being aware of racism and other social issues is like a bad thing.
So first, she seems confused by what I mean by normal gay, and what I mean is simply one of the many gay people out there in the world that is not a far leftist, that doesn't believe that biological sex is fake, that doesn't believe there are 1,000 genders, that doesn't want Marxism, that doesn't support the extreme radical elements of the LGBTQI, especially the QIA plus part of the community, and the people and the radical activism that we see coming out of those camps. That's what I mean by normal gay, like just an everyday gay or lesbian person who, if you encounter them on the street, isn't even on board with a lot of this really far left stuff and mostly just wants to live their life and be normal like everybody else. As far as her whole thing with the word woke, I understand that the origins of the word woke are what she refers to. Originally, people used it as a self-descriptor to say, you know, I'm woke, I see the problems in society, I'm against racism and all that. And of course, if that was still the definition, I guess I would have no issue with it, right? I also oppose racism. I also oppose systemic problems in society, but that's not what it means anymore, babe. We all know that. It's moved on. It's become this far left social justice ideology is what we're referring to. We are talking about that when we say woke. And frankly, I think it's an accurate descriptor for a lot of the people I react to and discuss. And there's just not an easy word to use that everyone knows and is familiar with. So is woke overused and cliche? Yes, but I use it a fair amount, partly because of a lack of better alternatives, to be honest. Now, here's my favorite part of this video. She actually did a trigger warning to her audience before showing them my content, and it's just...
Normal gay reacts to insane woke lesbian TikToks. Lesbian is in quotation marks as well. Let's have a look at that. Let's see what these woke lesbians are up to. It might be transphobic. Just because my instinct is like the normal gay thing doesn't make sense unless there's a bit of transphobia, especially with this being a centre-right, see, I can do it too, Brad, a centre-right, moderate, whatever. I can just foresee there being transphobia, so this is a warning just in case. I mean, editing me can put something here to clarify whether or not. We'll see in a minute, but just in case you don't want to see any transphobia, this is the bit. This is the time.
So honestly, this for me was really sad. I just can't imagine thinking so little of my audience, like having so little respect for them, assuming that they're so mentally and emotionally frail that they need a trigger warning before being exposed to ideas or words they might disagree with. I promise to never, ever treat you guys with that kind of condescending and patronizing paternalism. And I love how she puts discussing lesbianism related to genitalia as something offensive or triggering. Like, babe, what? It's literally inherently related to that. It's just a fact. It's not triggering. But yeah, one of my videos where I said non-binary people can't be lesbians if actually we accept non-binary, but also explain why I don't accept non-binary, that really upset her, and she had a lot to say about it. So let's listen to that. If these folks get their way, I mean, the word lesbian, it's just going to lose all meaning.
If these folks get their way? First of all, these folks is collectivizing this one woman's perspective. And it's a woman, it's a trans woman, that's why it has a problem with it. It's a woman saying, I love being a lesbian, it's a core part of my identity. I find being a lesbian very inclusive. It doesn't just mean this and this is what it means. That's insane! I can't believe this person loves their identity and knows what they want from relationships. Clearly that's going to destroy society. What's the problem? This is such a this is why, so I understand I probably often won't agree. But I completely understand commenting on laws and, like, big social changes, like, you know, if something is going through Parliament or whatever American political system, you know, if something's being discussed in terms of the political spectrum, if mainstream news is promoting stuff from a certain perspective and feels like one-sided, I completely understand commenting on that and having concerns based on your own beliefs. But seeking out people's personal TikToks who are just like, and again, I know someone's going to call me a hypocrite because I am, and they're right. Seeking out somebody's personal TikTok who's just like, this is how I identify and I love it. I have a wonderful life. This is what my identity means, etc. Like we just said. And being like, they're going to destroy society. What's the problem? Like, if these people have their way, what do you mean their way? Dating who they want? I don't understand how that affects Brad Polumbo. I don't know why Brad Polumbo is worried about the lesbians anyway. He's a normal gay.
Oof. Maybe don't pop off and try to do socio-political commentary about American culture and LGBT issues if you don't even know what Congress is, girl. That's embarrassing. Now, to address the substance of her critique here, I never said that this woke redefining of lesbian would destroy society. You literally just made that up. I never said that. I said that it would erode the meaning of the word lesbian into meaninglessness, and that's true. It would, because it was a TikToker arguing that non-binary people who aren't women, supposedly, are able to be lesbians, as are transgender men who are men, so men can be lesbian. So yes, you would erase it. You would erase the definition to the point of absolute and utter meaninglessness. But I never said that would destroy society. That's just you lying. And it's not just about what one random person said on TikTok. The major left-wing activist LGBTQ organizations are all embracing and pushing this redefinition of gay and lesbian to mean gender and nebulous things that no longer have to do with biological sex and can include people of the opposite biological sex to what they're traditionally understood to include, and they're actually trying to enshrine into law in the US through things like the Equality Act, pseudoscientific notions of gender identity that replace and erase biological sex as a concept. So I use an individual TikToker's video as kind of a entertaining kickoff point to discuss the issue, but it's not just a viewpoint held by one rando on TikTok. Come on, that's not honest. As for why I care about the intellectual attack on lesbianism as a concept when I'm not a lesbian, I don't know about you, but I don't literally only care about things that personally affect me, not in culture, not in politics, and not in life. That would be a pretty selfish way to go about viewing the world. And I also even kind of disagree that it doesn't affect me, because we are seeing an overall backsliding and backlash to the LGBT movement and LGBT acceptance, and part of that is rooted in the woke extremism really going too far and rubbing people the wrong way. I believe in freedom and tolerance for LGBT people, so I do care about counterproductive activism that I view as eroding that. To me, that seems perfectly logical and consistent. Emma went on to accuse me of transphobia because, of course, this is something they love to throw around like candy on Halloween, even though it's funny when I argue with people on the right wing, they call me woke and pro-trans. I actually just kind of have a sane and moderate position on gender and trans stuff. So, but according to her, that makes me transphobic. So take a listen. And what's funny is the thing that makes me supposedly transphobic isn't even about trans people. It's about non-binary people who are not trans. And no, you cannot be a non-binary lesbian, primarily because non-binary isn't a real or legitimate concept, but also
transphobia. There's discussion as well within the LGBT community because every label has a argument attached to it. That is why I get so fed up with it. But there is discourse, let's say, within the LGBT community over whether being non-binary makes you a part of the trans community. Most people I know say yes. Some people say no. A lot of people just don't care because most people are just trying to live their lives without Brad Polumbo judging them. If not transphobic, then just unnecessarily hateful, saying that non-binary people don't exist. It's not a real thing. Presumably you have some gender that Brad would assigned to you. Brad would decide what gender you are based on how you present, probably, which is stupid. And again, the examples of how stupid that is are everywhere because I am a cis woman, and because I have short hair, there is a debate over what gender I am, or am pretending to be, or should be, in like every video I ever make. Assigning people genders based on what you think they should be, what you see visually, is just pointless and stupid, and it doesn't work. So, in my opinion, if somebody identifies as non-binary, oh my god, nothing about my life has changed. That's still a cool person, that's still my friend. Literally nothing has changed, unless they've said, could you please refer to me by these pronouns? In which case, a tiny minuscule thing that doesn't affect my life at all has changed, and that's fine. Right-wing conservatism, especially again in the USA, is very binary. It's very gender binary. So it doesn't surprise me that he would be bigoted about non-binary people, because sort of a lot of their beliefs, I think they kind of have to be in a lot of ways, because their beliefs revolve around this is woman, this is man, man do this, woman do this, and that is proper right way for society to be. And then non-binary people come along and are like, hey, I blow your whole thing out of the water, and they're like, no, you can't exist, so I've decided you don't.
First of all, it's not transphobic because non-binary people are not trans. They don't have gender dysphoria. They don't transition to anything. They're not transgender. And babe, nobody is saying that non-binary people don't exist. This is so dumb. It's so tired as an argument. Of course they exist, and of course they are human beings who deserve dignity and the same rights as everybody else. But that specific aspect of their ideology and their identity is not valid. The same way that if somebody went around telling people they were a cat, we would all agree they are not in fact a cat. That's not us saying that they don't exist. What we are saying is that their claim that being gender nonconforming makes them a third gender or not one of the two sexes is inherently regressive and incoherent and actually sexist, in that it reinforces the same gender stereotypes they're supposed to be revolting against. It's also really strange to hear you accuse people like me of holding a rigid view of gender and sex, because it's actually the opposite. It's non-binary that holds that rigid view. I'm saying that there are two sexes, males and females, and that it is perfectly okay for males to wear makeup or for females to have short hair. All of that is fine. But it doesn't make them a third alternate sex or gender. It just makes them a male or female who presents in a certain way. Because those things aren't actually inherent to maleness or femaleness. But by endorsing the non-binary ideology, you're saying that they are. And yet you're accusing us of having the rigid gender roles. No, babe. Your math isn't mathing. But what do I know, guys? Apparently, I'm just an idiot.
I feel like Brad might be one of those people, one of those conservatives, a Ben Shapiro, if you will, who sounds on the surface when you listen for a couple of minutes way more intelligent than they are because of, you know, a certain eloquence, a good speaking manner. And then you actually listen to what they say and you look at all the quotation marks and brackets and you're like, this guy's an idiot.
I mean, look, Emma can call me names if she wants. I'm not really going to get into that or sling mud back at her. I actually think she's funny. I don't really agree with anything she has to say, but she's very charismatic and funny, and I laughed a lot watching her video. I will say she doesn't seem to have a very thorough understanding of politics or political theory, because first there was the whole thing about not knowing what Congress is, and now there's this.
Wait. He's anti-taxation? Calling taxation theft is very communist of you, Brad.
First of all, I didn't actually call taxation theft. I actually view it more as akin to extortion in a way. But opposing taxation and wanting minimal government is literally the opposite of communism, which wants an expansive, powerful government that controls the economy, and in order to do so would need huge levels of taxation. So you literally have no idea what you're talking about, yet you're wading into this political commentary territory. I just wouldn't be so quick to question other people's intelligence when you're dropping gems like this twice in a video that you could have edited out. That said, Emma is quite funny and quite personable, and she mocked my facial expressions a couple times in ways that I thought were really funny and honestly did point out how over the top and cringe I can be sometimes.
Lesbian relationships are just so special. So good. I swear to God, there's nothing like it.
So if
Man's taking a dump.
he also said some nice things about me as well, and acknowledged that not all my positions are boilerplate, right-wing, predictable, which I did appreciate. Like I always do, guys, I did reach out. I did invite her to come on the channel, come on the podcast, for a civil discussion, debate about these things. And she did reply, unlike Jammy Dodger, but she declined. And I don't know, I just don't have a lot of respect for that. Personally, I wouldn't ever make nearly a 1-hour video entirely about one person and critiquing them, but then if that person asked me to say it to their face, chicken out. I wouldn't do that. I don't really respect that. That's just me, guys. I don't know. Let me know what you think, and if you do go to Emma's channel, please do not harass, bully, or leave nasty comments. I don't support that. I don't want you guys doing that, okay? All right, let me know what you think of this latest YouTube drama, and don't forget to hit that like button, and let's get into our next topic. So now we got to talk about the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, who is so woke, once again, that she is accidentally being racist. Take a listen to what she had to say as part of a conversation about minorities and technological education.
Young black kids growing up in the Bronx who don't even know what the word a computer is. They don't know. They don't know these things. And I want the world open up to all of them, because when you have their diverse voices innovating solutions through technology, then you're really addressing society's broader challenges.
Yikes. Yes, she actually just suggested that black kids in the Bronx don't know what a computer is. Babe, no. They do. They absolutely do. For me, it's just another example of how incredibly out of touch the progressive, paternalistic worldview can be, and how often the same types who claim to be all about racial justice and diversity actually treat minorities with kid gloves and subject them to what is essentially the soft bigotry of low expectations. Also, this is not Kathy Hochul's first time putting her foot in her mouth like this. I just have to say, she's really not very articulate. It was funny watching her get called out even by members of her own party, because this was that bad. It was that oafish and cringe and, yes, racist, racially offensive. Now look, she has apologized for what she said, and I don't think Kathy Hochul is some dyed-in-the-wool racist with animus towards black people in her heart of hearts. I really don't. But I do think this kind of thing is a good reminder of how all the people who constantly preach about diversity and come from this woke progressive perspective are often totally out of touch with these actual communities, what they're actually like, what they actually want and believe in. A great example of this is the defund the police movement, which progressive politicians, and actually not Kathy Hochul, I don't believe, but progressive politicians pushed, despite most black Americans actually wanting more policing in their communities. And I'll just say that if the governor of New York really thought that black kids in the Bronx don't know what a computer is, then despite all her talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, she's clearly not in touch with the actual needs of her constituents. But what do you guys think? And could you possibly imagine what would happen if a Republican had said this? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now, we gotta talk about Biden's latest student loan bailout, because the amount of taxpayer money that Biden's spending on paying off people's student loans is getting astronomical. The Nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget reports that when you include the Biden administration's new student debt cancellation plan, they estimate all recent student debt cancellation policies will cost a combined $870 billion to $1.4 trillion. For context, that's more than all federal spending on higher education throughout the history of the United States. When you break those numbers down, it comes out to about $6,000 to $10,000 per federal taxpayer that's being spent. And as the committee points out, this spending has been inflationary, poorly targeted, a lot of it will go off to well-off Americans, and it will come at the expense of taxpayers who never went to college at all. Oh, and it will probably only make college more expensive when colleges jack up their prices even higher. And it's crazy because the amount of money being spent here on student debt relief could literally have been used to triple the Pell Grant program, which actually goes to in-need students, not wealthy, affluent people, and it still would have cost less than this whole boondoggle by quite a bit. But hey, who cares, right? President Biden doesn't care. It's not his money. It's our money. We're the suckers. Let me know in the comments what you think about spending that much money on student debt bailouts for students who went to college, who do tend to be better off than those who didn't, and that is still the majority of Americans. Don't forget to hit that like button, and now it's time for DELULU Epidemic, my segment where I react to takes from people who are showing they're stupid. Today, this MAGA influencer wants to fire teachers for an unusual reason. Gunther Eagleman says, "Teachers, if your students know your sexual preference, you should be fired." Now, he's meaning to refer to gay people, of course. But under this logic, you would have to fire vast numbers of heterosexual teachers who have mentioned their spouses in class or have photos of their husbands and wives on their desks. After all, students know their sexual preference. Look, I think this sentiment is coming from an understandable place. A lot of Americans are seeing woke lesson plans about gender identity and sexual orientation being pushed on kids in schools at increasingly younger and younger ages. They're deeply uncomfortable with that, and I think that's perfectly fair. But this backlash is going too far. It is absolutely fine for gay people to exist and to be teachers. And yes, even as teachers, acknowledge the existence of their families and their spouses like anybody else would. Otherwise, you're having an unfair double standard between heterosexual people and gay people. And simply describing what your family looks like or the existence of having a husband or a wife is not inherently sexual. You're the ones making it that. It's not inherently sexual when straight people do it, and it's not inherently sexual when gay people do it. It's about family and romance the same way it is when straight people do it, and it's not some sort of sexual content. I'm just seeing a lot of this online backlash to LGBT stuff go way, way too far, y'all. So, Gunther Eagleman, your DELULU is showing. Now it's time for Brad vs. TikTok, my segment where I react to the craziest and cringiest ideas floating around on the Clock app. Don't forget to subscribe if you're enjoying this, and don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your thoughts as we go along. Now today, this fat activist is once again insisting that you must find fat people sexy.
If you do not date fat people because you just happen to view fatness as neutral but not be particularly attracted to it, fine. That's a preference. If you don't date fat people because you think being fat means that they are gross, lazy, live an unhealthy lifestyle, or are embarrassing to be seen with in public, that's fatphobic. But to insist your preference is for people who aren't lazy, sloppy, and disgusting and unhealthy, meaning that means you prefer skinny people because all fat people are those other things, that's actually bigoted. That's actually deciding that one group is all the same because of how they look. Hope that makes sense. Have a good day.
Okay, hear me out, but I kind of agree with parts of this. First, I will state that it is absolutely fine to find fitness and health attractive, and in fact, it's probably evolutionarily ingrained in us. I totally disagree with this activist that we must view fatness as neutral. It's not, it's tragic and it's life-threatening, and for most people, it is not attractive. But if one was to reject fat people or overweight dating partners because of presumptions that they must be unhygienic or gross, I actually agree that that would be mean and uncalled for. You can't really conclude anything definitively about someone's hygiene simply based on their size. Lots of overweight people are perfectly sanitary, so we shouldn't be making those kinds of generalizations or judgments. It's also shitty to be ashamed to be seen with someone because of the way they look. I don't understand or accept that at all. So, to whatever extent those things actually are motivating people's preferences, and I'm not sure it's a very significant extent, but to whatever extent it is the case, I do agree that that's not good. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that like button. Now, before we wrap up today's show, we'll read a couple comments that you left on the last episode. One person writes about the anti-Israel student protesters on college campuses. How is wearing keffiyehs not cultural appropriation, according to they/them? That's actually a good question, because when I was in college, we would constantly get lectures about how Halloween costumes were harmful and racist if you wore a sombrero. Now you have all these people donning a Arab headdress in the name of solidarity, and that's fine. Woke white people can wear other people's cultures now, and that's perfectly fine, but Halloween costumes are just beyond the pale. Make it make sense. Another person said, as an Israeli, I really don't care about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. It's pure BS. There are tons of humanitarian trucks with food and first aid coming in there nonstop. And after October the 7th, I have no sympathy for them. They cheered on the footage of what was done, and when it was shown to them on a big screen in Gaza on that horrific day, cry me a river. So look, I understand how somebody who is Israeli and was deeply affected by the events of October 7th and the horrific terror attack could feel this way, could have their heart hardened in this manner. I would really encourage you to try to see it differently. The children in Gaza who have been killed did not vote for Hamas. They did not celebrate anything on October the 7th. We should all have compassion for people, for our common humanity, regardless of this kind of sentiment. Next, another person says, "Hi Brad, I'm an 18-year-old ex-far leftist. When I first realized I was bisexual, everyone around me assumed I belonged to the far left, and so I considered myself to be. I would argue in defense of matters such as child transitioning and hate speech being made illegal. I never even stopped to think if I agreed with these standpoints or not. It was simply a matter of being accepted socially with these opinions or being outcast. Your show has helped me with the self-realization of what I actually know in my heart to be my opinion instead of what people think I should stand for. Thank you for the part you play in information sharing. You are appreciated." Thank you so much, and thanks for joining the show. I hear from a lot of people who fall somewhere in this LGBT category who honestly never really had any representation of somebody like them who didn't just adopt all the left-wing positions, and once they encountered it, they realized they could think for themselves. And if that's something that I'm playing a part in promoting and creating, then I'm really happy about that, to be honest. All right, everybody, that is it for today's episode of Brad versus Everyone. Don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed this episode, and please do consider subscribing if you haven't stuck around yet and joined us. I know we just crossed 120,000, which is amazing, by the way, but I would love to have more of you. If you subscribe right now, I'll appreciate it. Do it. I'll wait a second. But regardless, leave a comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, and I'll consider reading it on the next show. And with that, I'll see you all tomorrow.